Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Danya Shakfeh. She is with a Motiva Business Law, and we're going to talk about some really cool stuff. You have a different perspective on business, and we're going to talk about the art of business today. So thank you for
Thank you
being
for
here
having
today.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Okay, cool. We always start with the origin story. The running joke is you were born and then something happened. Now you're on a show about mergers and
Yeah.
acquisitions and stuff. Could you fill up that small gap in between? So tell us how you ended up on in the M&A world.
So yes, I was first born. And let's see. So I initially wanted to become a lawyer I think a lot of lawyers go into law school thinking they're going to change the world, especially me being a minority. I was like, oh, civil rights and world peace and all that. Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to have an impact on world peace. There are a lot of very intelligent people that came before me that could not do it. So I don't see how I can. So, anyways, so I ended up kind of in the business law because I started to see a lot of situations around me where people who were friends or people who knew each other and had good relationships before they go into business and then there's a dispute, they end up hating each other and things go badly. And they end up in court. And so I found myself wanting to add value to people's lives and business owners specifically by helping them prevent those issues by doing the things that they should do when they start a business, like getting their partnership agreements, making sure they understand why they're in business together and how they can protect the business itself and themselves as individuals. With M&A specifically, it's kind of weird. I'm a smaller law firm, and I admit the concept of M&A was very intimidating to me because I imagined it to be the kind of law where only these big wig law firms on Wall Street doing these big deals. And then I had found that no, it's actually something that smaller businesses do on the daily, on Main Street. And it's something I enjoy. It's a nice combination because I don't like to litigate, but there's still some interaction, there's deadlines, there's still some strategy, kind of like litigation. So, versus just like writing a contract. And so that's how I ended up here.
I interview a lot of entrepreneurs who were attorneys at one point. It's one of the few things that I've ever come across where I think there's a high percentage. I haven't ever done the research on it, but I would imagine more than 50% of the people who graduate law school and pass the bar don't practice for more than 10 years.
Probably.
They're all doing something else, right? They got into it, and the interesting thing was I actually wanted to do law school too, and in one of the many paths I was starting to take in my life, I actually got accepted into one of the part-time programs. Was a class or two. I think it was two classes, getting ready to start the third one, and ended up in a vicious divorce with my first.
Mm,
And in the process of trying to find an attorney, I was like, I just can't find anybody I really like. A lot of these people were just like, oh my god.
yeah.
And as far as like quality of human being, I wanted to be around, and that's something I do with everything. Who do I want to? I'm gonna have to work with this person off and on. I want somebody that's good, but I
Yeah.
also want somebody who's just not, not a bad person, I guess is what I
Right.
look for. And I was like, I can't even find anybody of these I like. I don't know if I want to be one. And then I got really lucky in the fact that I had to drop out of law school, out of the program I just started because of all the money I was paying out to the attorneys and divorce and
Very
all that.
expensive, yeah.
And I got a contracting gig at a company that does technology, and I thought I wanted to be an intellectual property attorney. That's what I thought. I was gonna do patents and stuff. Like, cool, I could see all these inventions and stuff. And I got like, so in that process as consulting, they asked me where I wanted to set. They showed me a few seats, and I was like, you know what? As you did the tour, your intellectual property attorney had 2 extra desks in his office. You might I'm thinking about going back. I told him about law school. I'm thinking about going back and, when I straighten out some of this, other stuff I have to pay. I like to see what he does. If it's not a problem with him or me, I'm a project manager. Like, I don't
Mhm.
need to be in a particular area. Can I work in that room and just watch? Man, that guy, I think he was nearly suicidal. He sat there and stared at paperwork all day, filed paperwork, rarely talked to any human beings, read all that stuff all day, and looked really miserable. And after, I was there probably 8 months. After about 8 months of watching how miserable he looked, like, I ain't doing that either.
Yeah. That's a huge misconception because law, like on TV, is so glamorous and
Yeah.
courts and trials, but I think what people don't realize is that most of law is you are sitting at your desk. Like even if you're a litigator
Yeah,
or a trial attorney, you're reading memos, you're doing research. There's very little of that courtroom stuff.
yeah,
And even when you go, it's not nearly as exciting. But
yeah,
yeah, so business attorneys and business, I think law schools actually, I mean, more recently they've been more open to teaching lawyers business or how
mhm.
to be a business owner. But before it was usually like they would just assume that you're going to go the big law route, and almost like the law schools were designed to create jobs for those big law firms. And by creating jobs that profit for them, that's really what it comes down to. So most attorneys don't know, or like most attorneys who start their own business don't know a lick about business. And I would even say that the way that we're trained in law school actually hurts our ability to become entrepreneurs, because we're kind of trained to be risk averse. We're trained to not really, or just to look at details that maybe on the business end don't matter as much. And there's kind of the people interaction aspect that kind of goes out the window too in that process. So I had to unlearn a lot of things when I started my own business and got proper business coaching.
Yeah, I bet. The other one is almost all college degrees are what you said. They prepare you to be a good employee.
Yeah.
I did go back to school. I got a master's degree, MBA in marketing, and I thought, this is great. I'm an entrepreneur. Actually, I started to get one in technical management, and I realized I didn't. I hated tech, and so I went into the counselor's office. Was like, look, I'm dropping out. I'm not going to finish this. She's like, you
Mhm.
finished. You pretty much finished everything but your capstone, your major, right? Why would you leave now? You got to take 4 or 5 more classes, and then you're done. And I was like, because I don't want to do technical management anymore. She's like, oh, cool. What do you want to do? I was like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to start another business. And she's like, cool, do something in that. And it came down to either accounting or marketing. And I'll be honest, the accounting I had, you have to take that for your undergrad. You take 2 classes, 1 and 2, and
Mhm.
for your graduate, MBA program, you got to take accounting 1 and 2. I already had enough of it. No, I didn't like it. Right.
Yeah.
And I was single at the time, and there was a girl I was trying to introduce myself to on a regular basis and wasn't giving me attention. She was in the marketing program. So
Mhm.
I was like, I'll try marketing. I'm gonna sit in
There you
class.
go.
I'm gonna because the program was everything was done in teams.
Mm,
So you had to give team presentation. Like 50% of your grade was basically could you work on teams in this master's degree
mm,
program. So you have to do papers together, stuff like that. Eventually I'll be on a team with her, right? She'll have to talk to me.
mm.
And the long story short, she still never gave me the attention to, or time of the day. Turns out, she had somebody. But the point was, I actually started really liking the marketing side of it. Like that was
Mhm.
really cool. Got out, thought I had, I got this MBA in marketing and want to make it work. And again, it was only geared to being a great employee. A lot of the stuff they teach you and all the branding strategies and all that stuff doesn't mean a thing when it comes
Yeah,
to small business trying to get something up from the ground. Um, you know, it's just the wrong approach. So I ended up
yeah,
going to get retrained by people in the field, like you're talking coaches and mentors.
yeah.
So I get
Yeah, no,
that.
good. The education system is really designed to teach people how to conform, and entrepreneurship is the opposite. You shouldn't conform, because
Right.
if you're doing what everybody else is doing, then you're only gonna get the same results everybody else is getting.
I have a
So,
lot of people that go to the meetups and stuff I host, and mergers and acquisition ones, and entrepreneurial stuff I host, and they're always like, there's 2 different groups of people like, "Hey, I'm gonna figure this out." It's like, "Cool, you're gonna make it." And the other guy's like, "Well, I've done X, Y, and Z, and I know everything about business." I was like, "You'll probably never start one for real."
yeah.
Right? It's 'cause the moral of the story is most people I know who did really well in business will tell you, "Had I known now, if I knew what I knew right now, I probably would never started the business in the first place. If I knew
Mm,
how complex it was or how regulated it was, but they didn't. They just started. They got an idea. The what is it, internal optimism of an entrepreneur. They got an
mm,
idea and they're going to figure it out. They just go, 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 and they run into these
yeah,
obstacles and they climb them one obstacle at a time, and then they make it to the other end. But if you ask them, if you had to start over again, what would you do? It's like I'd probably pick a different field. This one's really complex, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
there's a little bit of brilliance in not knowing. You know?
Yeah, I get for those who kind of appreciate or can kinda get through that process of learning and
Yeah.
being open to different experiences that make you, at least make me uncomfortable. To me, if you're comfortable being a business owner, you're not doing it right. It's supposed to feel a little bit scary.
Yeah. It's like, it's the constant, challenges too. You're always challenging yourself. How do I improve this? How do I,
Yeah.
what am I missing? Right. Let's talk about you have this concept called the art of business.
Mhm.
Tell us about that. What's your thought process around it? Why is it related to art at all?
So art is a form of expression, and I think having your own business is also a form of expression. So kind of like what I was saying before about conformity is that if you're going to conform, then you're only going to look like everybody else. Whereas when you start your own business, it's an opportunity to build things and to build the business the way you want to. So it could be your corporate culture, maybe or the way that you provide your services or sell your products in your marketing, even like creating your logo. I mean, that's art. And if your logo is meant to reflect your corporate culture, then that's like literal art, but even more about the way that I want to have my staff interact with each other, the way I interact with them. It's just what I want to do. So, I mean, outside of any like legal reason or regulations, you can do whatever you want in business. So, I mean, even when I made my office, I decorated, I mean, it's not like a typical law firm office. It's blue. There's marble decor, and my conference table is black and white marble. It's just different because that's just how I wanted to do it. Even the way that I screen clients, there's the way that everybody else does it, and then there's the way that I want to do it. But so that's how, for me, it's a form of art. It's a blank canvas, and I wish more business owners actually saw it that way and took it as an opportunity. We get too scared. We think, oh, well, we're just going to do what everybody else is doing because that's just how it's done. But it's like, no, it's the opposite. You want to stick out, you have to do things differently. And that's where your creative expression can come in.
It's interesting because one of the things that people are told over and over again when they go to sell their business is, you know, formalize everything, standardize everything, um, standard operating procedures, remove yourself from the business. But if you really look at it, that doesn't take away from anything of what you just said,
Correct.
right? You can have a very artistic, very different approach to business and have a well-documented, well-oiled
Yeah.
machine that runs day in and day out. And I know a lot of people are implementing. I've interviewed the guys that created the EOS system and stuff like that.
Mhm.
You can still live within the art of what you're talking about and doing things unique and use a common
Yeah.
system for your day-to-day operations, right? So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the standard operating procedure, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. The standard, it's not meant, I mean, the standard operating procedures are like your internal documentation, but for me, it's like the guide of the arts or kind of a tour
mhm.
of what that expression is, so everybody is on the same page in terms of how the business is run. But it's like standard; it's an internal standard. It doesn't need to be standardized. Like not all businesses are standardized to each other. I think.
What do you think about there's this whole mentality built to exit mentality out there, right?
Yeah.
Which is, one of the concept, and I know some people that have done it really well. They went into I've interviewed people who went into business with the total view of who they're selling it to.
Hmm.
Okay, here's 5 companies that would probably buy this thing we're building. Let's build it, let's get it up and running, and then, if at any point we're ready to sell, we'll start it from day one with that. Um you know, uh, built in.
Hmm.
So they build the thing. They use this like they look at those 5 and they choose common computers. Like, okay, these 5 people use this accounting system, right? 3 of the 5 use this one, so they pick something that's common, and they try to model their business so it's really easy to integrate into one of those big guys. My fear is, I've seen it. 2 of those guys win, and one of them sold to that exact target. I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of people try that and they never get off the ground running because they're trying to live within what they think is standard conformity to a certain
Right.
system, and they don't give themselves the leeway to solve the problems in the moment.
Mm, mm. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't really love that idea. I could see why people do it. I mean, if
Yeah.
that's their goal, that makes sense. But just because their target company, does things a certain way, it does not mean that they would not appreciate something being done differently. So,
Hmm.
I mean, think about like Facebook bought Instagram, for example. I mean, though they're complete opposite. Imagine if Instagram was like, we're just going to be like Facebook, then why would Facebook buy it? They wanted something different. And now Facebook tries to be like Instagram, which is
Right.
their target company. So I think it's more about, as the company, if you want, like if you're creating a business to exit, you want to be clear about what value you're providing and how the target company no, I'm sorry, the company that could be buying would be how they could, like, why would they find that valuable? And then everything else is up to you. And the model and everything else could be really part of that art of creating something new.
I've got it, and I get that, and I also seen some really, really rough ones, right? When Microsoft bought Hotmail, I gotta be careful what I say. So when
Mhm.
Microsoft bought Hotmail, we actually did one of the companies I work for did the anti-spam and antivirus for Hotmail. When they started swapping out their servers from Linux, which is a nerdy thing to say for Unix operating systems, to Microsoft computers because it was Microsoft, their performance was so horrible. We actually had to write special code in there because our software quit working right on their new platform, even though we had wrote it to work on both. But it was because their performance was so bad. They had so many memory leaks. They had to recycle or reboot
Mm,
different banks of machines on a regular basis. They had such a hard time adapting to the differences in technology. So I would say, I would imagine, and I don't know for sure, I would imagine that Facebook and Instagram was probably operating on similar tech stacks,
mm,
but different models. So what I was referring to is when you're going to build something out and you know that your top 5 buyers operate on particular tech stacks,
I
probably a
see.
good idea to use that technology, right?
Yeah,
You don't want to run on QuickBooks when if everybody's running on zero, right? And
yeah,
and you want to sell it, you know you're growing this thing to sell it to one of them, you know, probably ought to learn if you and you know maybe you don't know QuickBooks already. If you're going to learn
mhm,
one, might as well learn the one the majority of people are using, right?
yeah, yeah,
And and you're probably that's a horrible example because accounting is going to be every person I've ever seen that does accounting does it differently.
mhm,
So when I
mhm,
first got into this, I like I said, I did my undergrad and my master's both had accounting courses. I thought it was supposed to be a certain way, and then
mm,
it got into this and started looking at everybody's books. And I've never been a stock investor by any means. I did day trading, but we don't look for at quarterly reports very often in
yeah,
day trading. But the when you start looking at this stuff, every one of them's done differently,
mhm,
right? Like, so what is this? Like, how is this possible? And I have a friend who's a forensic accountant. I'd pass him to her and she's like, no, it's normal. That's right. Like, what do you mean it's normal? It's different than the last 5 I looked at, right? Like, yeah, that's still okay. So
yeah.
there's an art form in there. I guess there's this guide that you have to stay within. But so I guess that would be a bad example of it. But for a lot of stuff, just being on similar tech stacks would probably be
Yeah,
important.
but still, I mean, like the value proposition is going to be different.
Hmm.
The corporate culture. I mean, with an acquisition, the corporate culture might disappear, but maybe the purchasing entity would, appreciate how things are being done, and then change as well. What else? So, and then, just incorporating certain values or um, artwork, and models too. So, but usually, I mean, in my view, like me personally, like as I'm building a business, I mean, I run it as if it were to, like, I was going to exit just for the sake of, like building a business that can run without me. But I want to stick to how I want to do things, because to me it's the way that I'm expressing myself, and why I'm different, and that also plays out to how I present myself to my clients as well.
It also helps you carve off a niche in a very hard to define market. Like,
Yeah.
there's one thing to say, okay, a divorce attorney versus an M&A attorney, right?
Mm,
But if there's 6 M&A attorneys in town, you know, 2 might only do really big deals. They won't even look at you unless you're doing a $50 million deal.
mhm.
And then now you're competing with the other, I don't know, say there's 10 of them out there. So now you got 8 of them out there. How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
You're going to do it by the art that you put into it, the
Mhm.
way you treat your customer and stuff. A lot of the other guys are going to try to tell you pedigree, like, we're all Ivy or,
Yeah.
everybody's going to have it's the standard way of business. We all have to carve off something. That's
Mm,
another reason why that I was telling you before in the hand, I was looking at a particular business. And I told you they were in a declining revenue statute, or basically they'd made some changes and everything was declining, but the competitiveness was up. One of the other things is there was no really unique niche that they carved out that
mm.
we could live into, and I couldn't identify one that we could do right.
Right.
They had a couple cool things, but, it wasn't like, "Okay, this is our space in this," and it'd be hard there's no mode around it. I like to use the word mode, competitive advantage. With
Mm,
your artisticness, you're creating kind of a competitive advantage, what I refer to as a mode. You
yeah,
do things that people your customers come to you because they like the way you do them, the way you treat them, the way you present yourself, that they want that, right? That is part of your competitive advantage to some extent because
yeah,
it's unique enough that the referrals that they give and the stories they tell,
mhm,
right? Then, that's that's directly related to what you're creating in your space, you
yeah.
know?
Like, for me, I mean, as for my own business, for my law firm, I'm huge about having a relationship with my clients, and not just like a business
Mhm,
relationship, but like I want to get to know them as people. Why are they in business? What motivates them? And what, like, what makes you different? Does it have to be complicated or glamorous? I mean, for example, many clients who come to me complain that their attorneys or attorneys they've tried to hire are not responsive. I mean, you would think that just, business 101, like you get a lead, you call them back. And I can say that's true personally because I've hired lawyers too, and I've called law firms and they just never get back to you, which is wild to me. And so I know that, like, one of the things that makes me different is that I have a clear procedure, like an SOP on what happens if our client contacts us, and how we make sure that we respond to them. And even, or like my assistant, my intake, we also call her like the client of concierge, or the client like relationship manager. And like a lot of or excuse me, like a lot of law firms don't have that
mhm.
role. But like, what's wrong with having that relationship? And it's just more warm and friendly. I think attorneys sometimes want to seem like they're awesome and like untouchable sort of. I'm like, no, we can be relatable. We can show our human side to our clients and feel like have a warm feeling, Sorry, that came out weird. Warm, kind of that, like that human to human connection, I guess, for lack of a better term. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah.
I can tell you I'm 51, and I don't know if I've ever done business with somebody I have had to call more than twice. So I have a 2 call policy on anything I do
Yeah.
in life. If I want you to come mow my lawn, I'll call you once. If I get a business signal, I'll leave a voicemail, and I might call you back. These days, I might text you back, say, "Hey,
Yeah.
call me. I've got business for you. Call me back." I've even got friends that got mad at me, like, if you're a really close friend, I might try more than twice, but that's probably the
Yeah.
only exception, right? I've got a really good friend who owns a heat and air business. I would give you my business. I own a bunch of real estate or had a bunch of real estate. Less and less these days. They're refinancing out of underneath me, but I own or finance them all off, so I wouldn't have to manage them. But if there's an AC down, I call him first.
Hmm.
And then I'll text him, say, "Hey, I got work for you, or when are you available?" But he knows that if he can't get back to me, these people are living in these things.
Yeah.
I don't have to do it as much anymore because, um, like I said, I want to finance them all off. Now it's like we have a commercial building and some other stuff, so I call him for that type of stuff. But that said, he knows after probably a day in Oklahoma, at least I'm in California now, but all that stuff's in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, during the August, it gets 110
Mm.
and humid,
Yeah.
right? Nobody's gonna show up to work if the building AC is down,
Yeah.
right? So if you can't come over today or tomorrow, I'm calling the next guy on the list, right?
Yeah.
And he knows that. And that's why I used to tell people all the time when we go to business networking stuff and they hand me their card, like, I've got a heat and air guy, but it's never bad to be my second person to call.
Hmm.
They're like, "What do you mean by that?" I was like, "'Cause I'm only gonna call you once, maybe twice,
Yeah. I
right?"
think that's a really good policy to
Yeah,
have, because if they can't respond to you when you're trying to when you're trying to pay them, you're trying to
right,
they, like, imagine how it's going to be if you've already paid them. Then what's their incentive? So
right.
I like that. Yeah, you want someone who's going to respond to you, and that's a kind of good way to know early on.
We still have a small business there, and that's like, "Hey, we return everybody's call." Like, I tell my
Yeah.
guys, it's like, "I don't care." And the problem these days is we get so many calls. It's a little pest control company that's run mostly by my relatives. I still have, part of it. And, that said, the, if they can't get to the phone within about the 3rd or 4th ring, it rings to me,
Hmm.
right? And I'm in California, but, like, we answer those phone calls, right? It doesn't go to voicemail. It'll ring to me, and if I can't get to it, it'll go to voicemail. But we call those people back same
Yeah.
day, within a couple hours, hopefully. Nobody goes and thinks that we're not going to return calls.
Yeah.
Um, if Problem with a lot of these businesses is if I wait more than an hour, they've probably already picked somebody else because they picked us out of a yellow page, unless it was a referral. They picked us
Right.
out of a online directory or something, and ring, ring, ring. Okay, I'll call the next guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's really important to call people back. And that's just part of, I mean, it's kind of going back to the art of business. Like you have
Hmm.
to really identify your core values. I mean, that's part of being a business owner is, do we want to be the kind of business that is reachable? There's so much technology too, and there's like services that if you can't get to your phone, then it can go to an answering service. At least a human picks up and they'll say, like, like we'll have someone call you back as soon as possible. And then we also have like automation, so you can automate responses. Like that's something I do. If you call my law firm, you either like you get a referral or we tell you that we can't help you, and but you get some sort of feedback from us one way or another, because we just care about every person that calls us, because that's part of my value system in my law firm. That's my art.
So we were talking beforehand. You're kind of in the Chicago area, right?
Mhm.
So, what are the Main Street type of businesses you get to work with there? There's still a lot of manufacturing around, or what?
Um, I know that there is, but I haven't really dealt with them too much. More like restaurants, lawn mowing companies I see that a lot. Like service providers, car washes are pretty popular now. I mean, there's car washes booming, and it's people like that because it's kind of like a passive income sort of business model. Some stuff in retail. So those are pretty much the ones that I've dealt with most recently. Yeah. So I know there's like I said, some manufacturing out there, but it just hasn't been part of my clientele.
Yeah, I was really interested in the car wash space for a little while there, and then I moved to California, and they're so regulated here. Like, I am not interested. They're so
The
like,
water.
oh yeah, like these car washes here have. And I'm not positive, but I believe they have some type of system underneath them to recapture that water
Mm,
and like do all kinds of stuff to it before it's released because it's horrible water, right? If you
yeah.
think about it, you're especially if you pop open your hood and you're washing off, the engine wash and stuff like that. You're doing classic cars. That's got motor oil and mud and dirt
Yeah.
and road debris and chemicals and wax and you name it in that water. And like, there's one car rush here, and it's 55 feet, probably to 100 feet from the Russian River that runs into the ocean, right?
Oh,
I bet you they regulate that thing. Like, there's no
yeah.
seepage from there into the river whatsoever, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I started looking at that. I was like, yeah, probably not going to get into that space
Hmm.
here. the other one is
Yeah.
the other one here would be the laundry services, right?
Mm,
Um, I think in California you actually have to you pay some type of fee or something. I was talking to somebody that buys laundry. He said you better look into it if you're going to buy laundry mats in California, because there's some initial fee you have to pay because of the water usage and how much wastewater you
mm,
get rid of. So,
yeah.
yeah, they make it a lot more difficult here than they do in a lot of other places. So,
Yeah. California is well known for their wonky laws.
yeah, we're here. We moved here in Juneau last year, but we have family in the area and they needed our help. So it's one of those,
Mm,
have
yeah.
skills, and I told you before the show, I'm prior military. I still have that mindset, have skills will travel, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
used to be have guns will travel, but that's not a very nice thing. So
Yeah.
now it's have skills will travel. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the
You got to do what you got to do to help the people that you love.
Yeah, so we were in Oklahoma for 15 years because my parents and family were needing help, and they're all
Mm,
gone. They're gone. You know, now, and now we're out in here. But the
mm.
difference is it's beautiful here. I
Yeah.
love Oklahoma. I love my people there, but I'm living in the redwood forest. I can go to a vineyard down the road if I want to try some wine, which I've been here for a year and I've yet to do. But
Mhm.
that says how much I drink wine. But not opposed to it. It's just I haven't done it. And
Yeah.
then I go the other way, and I love the ocean. I absolutely am
Mm.
just in love with listen, I don't get in the water, it's cold, but
Yeah.
just to sit there and watch the waves, watch the surfers. Whenever there's a storm, you can find me there. So
Yeah.
like
Very
the
relaxing.
biggest storm we had 25 to 32-foot waves. And I
Wow.
did some research afterwards, and I didn't know this, but I guess there's the potential for rogue, like a what? So in a storm, like when there's 25, 30-foot waves, it's a potential for a 2x that. So 1 in 1,000 waves or something could be twice that.
Mm.
So I'm sitting at the edge, and these are cliffs, and the water's cracking against the cliff. And I look over, and I'm the only one there. These are parking lots where you can hang out and watch. There's usually a dozen people there.
Mhm.
And I'm the only one there. I'm the only one on the coast today. And I was like, okay, that's awkward. But hey, look at these waves. They're just coming. You could feel the ground rumble when they hit because
Mhm.
they would hit in the side of the cliff I was standing on, and mist would shoot up a little bit. And then I look over there, and there's one of the not game wardens, but they drive up and down, check each spot, and make people. They have binoculars and they watch the surfers and stuff, make sure everybody's being safe. Park patrol or kind of game warden, park patrol. They're sitting there staring at me with binoculars. And I looked over at the guy, and he's like, waving at me. No, don't be there. So I
Mhm.
started thinking, okay, if something across bigger came there, it would hit me in the car.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, there's a reason I'm the only one looking at the edge of this,
Yeah.
standing here at the edge of the cliff
Cool,
watching
no,
them. But no, it's beautiful here. So let's
that's
go
wonderful.
back to do you get to you refer to it as the art of business. I was curious, is there much, do you get to work with any of the are you in art any other way? I guess the word I'm looking for. Are there art related businesses, art galleries and stuff? Because there's a lot of
Mhm.
old architecture there. I've been to Chicago a couple of times. There's
Yeah,
kind of like Tulsa. There's some really cool old buildings there.
yeah. To be honest, when I think of art, actually, I kind of purposely using it outside of the traditional art or like
Okay.
the words that we think,
Yeah.
because I think that anything can be art.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's your form of self-expression. So no, to be honest, I don't.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the beauty of it. It's like you don't have to be like a quote quote artist to produce art or creation out in the world. I know that it's just the idea of building and creating. Like when I was little, I've always loved like arts and crafts. I used to use an app called, I think, Front Page it was, to actually build websites, and I used to make
Hmm.
them different.
Yeah.
Like different colors, like the scroll bar would be different. And it's just this idea of building and creating, like you have something in your mind and you want it to come to life, and it can be business. So yes, but so that's kind of by design and using it
We're
differently.
dating ourselves here. Yeah, front page hasn't been. I
Yeah.
don't think front page has been around for a while.
Yeah, I think
You
they're
brought
using
it up,
it.
and I was like, "Yeah, I know that one." I was like, "Wait a second, that hasn't been around for probably 10 or 15. It might
Yeah.
still be out there, but I don't think it's been around for 10 or 15 years." No,
Yeah.
I predate HTML, so I'll go that route. So I actually got a job offer once by the government by no other thing to come in, and they want to pay me $55,000 a year to convert docs into HTML to put them on an intranet for the
Wow.
government. And I looked at this, and like I'm a tech nerd by previous trade. The language is so simple. I was like, this thing's going to this job is going to be gone within 6 months, a year. Somebody's going to do what they call a WYSIWYG, like Word's a WYSIWYG for the underlying code that takes to do formatting text, a typesetting software that takes to do text. Somebody's going to do a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what a front page was, is a WYSIWYG, or what you see is
Yeah.
what you get. So you can just visually lay things out. So they're going to do that for HTML so fast. I'm not taking this job, and I took a different one. But
Mm.
sure enough, the guy that took that job had to transition to something else within probably 6 months of working there,
Mm.
because they got a simple app to do everything he was doing. So, but
Yeah, those are nice. Those are fun apps to use because you can.
I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
I could have taken that because they were just converting docs to that. I could
Mm.
have taken the docs, which were in a different thing, and just did a translator out myself, and basically made a bot to do my job for me.
Mm.
And I say, if I can solve it within probably 6 months of myself and like automate my job, somebody else is going to do this for everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I used to do that for other stuff at work. If I have to do it more than 2 or 3 times, I either pay somebody else to do it, or I write a bot, just to write some type of
Yeah.
tool. They call them bots now, but I'd write some type of automation to do that. If it's repetitive, like,
Yeah.
I'll automate
We have
this thing.
those a lot. We automate a lot in our firm, like
Mm,
like the hiring or like when a client hires us, the
mhm,
process, they automatically get a form to send documents, and
mm.
the follow-ups are all automated. Yeah, like I said, I mean, if it's kind of that repetitive task, it can be automated these days. And that's the nice thing too about these days, if you're starting a business, you don't necessarily need to hire a lot of staff, because you can get an app or CRM or whatever it is to help automate all that. And so you can focus on your business vision.
Yeah. And then there's, workers around the world who are just extremely brilliant that, speak perfect English. Like, I
Yeah.
have staff in the Philippines that speak better English than I do. I'm an
Yeah.
Oklahoma boy.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
VA, which you probably will interact with, before this is over with, because
Yeah.
she's the one that publishes the stuff, if you haven't already. But she probably speaks better English than me or my kids because we grew up in Oklahoma. So I got to be careful
Right.
not to say wash versus wash, right? Got to go wash the clothes. There's no R in it.
Yeah.
But so I fight my accent off where she's so there's just people out there where
Yeah.
you, a lot of people think, well, I can't afford an employee yet. Like, well, you can't afford one on your neighborhood. Why don't you take a look at the world, see what's out
Yeah.
there? And I'm real big on, let's hire local and help local. But if you can't
Yeah.
yet, hire where you can hire and then move it local when you can,
Yeah.
right?
I
When it makes
offshore
sense.
too, and it was helpful at the beginning of my practice.
Oh,
And
definitely,
yeah.
absolutely. So, let's talk about business law,
Mhm.
and what that means to the small business owner. What are some of the things that you sit down at your big marble table when a business owner comes in and they're either looking to like shore up the business because they might want to sell it someday, or they just they just, what do you call it, incorporated or made their LLC. What are
Mhm.
some of the things that you would tell them to look at first?
If it's more than one business owner, so if they're business partners, I really tell them to sit down and really get a grip on their relationship amongst each other, because I've seen even very successful businesses get tanked because they didn't talk about how they were going to split profits or who was responsible for what, or even something basic like sometimes the biz or like one of the business partners may contribute money and there was a misunderstanding as to whether that money was a loan or part of the investment, and so they fight over that. And it's just really unfortunate that you have an otherwise well-run business get tanked because of the the business owners not knowing what their roles are. So like sit down, and if you have an LLC, you want to make sure that you have your operating agreements, and having those discussions is really important. That's where I start. The second thing is to make sure if there's any like regulations in their industry that they need to follow. You certainly don't want to start having a successful business and then get fined, or the IRS coming after you, or anything like that. Next thing I do is like build your team, get an accountant who can advise you on, taxes, and a bookkeeper so you know your numbers. As cliche it is, if you're a business owner, you have to know your numbers. You want to know your profit margins, how many clients or customers you need to meet your goals. Um, what else? Any local, I think what's missed a lot too is any local regulations. It's easy just to look at state level and federal level, but is there something specific to your county or your town that you need to look out for? Yeah, that's where I start. And then also, yeah, contracts too. Making sure that your contract is easy to understand. So if you have a contract with a vendor or your own customers or clients, make it clear, so that you don't have an issue with those people, because that's also a really good way to lose money.
Yeah, we're in the process of moving some of our LLCs here to California because it doesn't make sense, like, to leave them
Yeah.
where they were because there's no business there anyway. And it's strange here because, like, we have a parent LLC and then we have a bunch of DBAs. Well,
Hmm.
the LLC is done at the state level, but the state doesn't do the DBAs. You have to go to the county level here.
Oh,
So
really? Interesting.
how do the other counties know what they? Because
Huh.
you go to the local county, you do it and you run it in the local county business paper, right? So it's
Mhm.
all filed at the county level. I'm in a very rural area, right? We're what's called an unincorporated town. Like, so there's no mayor, there's no formal, police department and stuff. There's sheriffs here, but
Mm.
they're county sheriffs. But so we're really rural. We're in the wood.
Yeah.
We're back in the woods here. That said, like every state, and I've been in here, Texas. Like I told you, I live in Hawaii. I formed LLCs almost everywhere I live because I've always been an entrepreneur. Even in Hawaii, right? Used to have a thing in Hawaii called Diamond K Networks. We did networking. We installed networking cables for like the schools and all kinds of stuff. Cable, but every state's different. So uh, most of them, the LLCs form at the state level with the Secretary of State. That's normal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you get past that, like if you got to do a DBA and you don't want to like have an LLC for everything or whatever, like
Yeah.
I've noticed that they're all a little bit different. So you have to like dive
That's true.
into what's different here, right?
Yeah.
So
I just looked it up real fast because I was like, "No way," but oh my god, yeah. That's wild, because that's a lot of paperwork for, I mean, if you're operating throughout the state, we have to register with every county. That seems kind of
Yes,
unnecessary.
yeah, and the second part of that, like, it's not every like, you don't even have to do it for every county. It's just
Hmm.
your county. It's like, so if I
Oh,
have a DBA that's I'm using only on the internet, I don't there's nobody in my county that ever writes me a check to that
yeah,
DBA, right? All my stuff's, online, but in order to have it under California, that's where I'm supposed to do the stuff in order to, like, go and
yeah,
put that DBA on my bank so I can make deposit if it's a local bank, to make deposits here. That I need that, to make
yeah.
it
But then,
legal
yeah,
for
how would you know if someone else? Yeah, like how would you know? Yeah, that's I find that very strange.
it's very strange. That's like, surely that's not right. Say it's the same way when like the franchise tax board here, within the first 12 months, you got to pay $800 a year to keep your LLC alive.
Mm,
You got to pay the
right.
franchise tax board. So you
Mm,
you pay the state your LLC thing, but then you got to have this tax thing that's $800 a year minimum until you hit over $250,000 in revenue, and then I think it goes up. But
mm,
yeah, it's just like, and every like Tulsa even had weird stuff. Like, I was in business for years, and all of a sudden I got these just letters from the city of Tulsa that they wanted to know like an inventory of all my internal office because I had to pay property taxes on my business, assets. And
wow.
I'm like my desk and my like, they wanted to know what desk I had, what computer, like just weird stuff.
I
You had to
don't
pay
think
this
used
weird
furniture
property.
has any value.
I was like, like, you
Yeah.
know, and like all our stuff, all my stuff, we're scrappy because all the stuff I have buddies that like, I had a buddy that knew friends that own
Mhm.
secondhand furniture store, like high end furniture, like beautiful oak desks and
Yeah.
stuff. But we got these things for a penny on the dollar, but they didn't ask you what you paid for it. They wanted to know what its value was. So I had
Mm,
a $2,000 desk, right? Beautiful
right.
red oak and stuff like that. But I think I paid $400 for the thing because it had 2 scratches in it. Well, I'm a woodworker by hobby. I just fixed those areas with a pin and
Mhm.
resealed it and put a glass top on it. It was beautiful. Um, but, anyway, like, yeah, so every state's got different things and every like, that was only Tulsa County, like, Oklahoma
Mhm.
City did their own weird thing, and, like, if you got
Wow.
outside of the county, so, like, if you went to Sapulpa or something and you didn't have to pay, an extra 5 or $600 worth of property taxes on, computers and stuff I got laying around the office, so, yeah.
Interesting. That is very interesting.
So, go to your attorney, figure out what's local because,
Yeah.
they'll know the local rules, regulations, and weirdness that's for your town or for your
Yeah.
state and your
That's a good
county.
lesson for sure. Yeah. I had someone who tried to start a business, and you can, here in Illinois, you can do your DBA at the county level. I just don't know why you would, but you can. And so someone started a business, and they had done it that way, and I was, and they thought it was what you're supposed to do, and I was like, you don't have any of the corporate protections. You're
Mhm.
only limited to this county, in terms of the name that you could use. It's different here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you definitely just want to talk to someone who's at least done it before, who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it's one of those, I like to do because some people I like to cover all the bases. So the DBAs we do are like I own the domain name, and
Right.
like so, some sponsors don't think first and they just like write a check to how to
Mm,
exit. Well, how to exit isn't the LLC. It's
mm,
Ixu Media
yeah,
Holding Company. It's a media holding company that owns all of it. So yeah, it's one of those like, so what do I do with this thing now? If I had my DBA file with my bank, so it's one of those. I do it because
yeah,
it's easier to explain to or going back. It's easier to go back to do that than to go back to a sponsor. Like, will you reissue this check to this company? 'Cause that's
yeah,
who owns it. So
yeah,
yeah, it's like you said, there's the I think there's the art side of business, like well, you're talking about doing things your own way, and there's a little bit of the science things, right?
yeah,
Like regulations and rules and things you don't want to, lines you don't want to cross on accident, like
yeah.
especially
But
IRS.
I think when you know the rules, it kind of gives you your boundaries, and you can create more art that way because now you know exactly like what lines you have to stay in and what you don't, instead of guessing and assuming and then and
You know,
ending up in trouble, or like limiting yourself, thinking you have a limitation and then in reality you don't. So I think in that way it can be useful to know
I've been in
all the rules.
businesses that were so complex. We had to like map out all the different rules inside of them, right?
Mm,
And then move like put all the like I had one of my offices. We actually had 300. One of the rooms had 360-degree whiteboards, floor to
mm,
ceiling whiteboards. We wrote all the laws and
wow.
all the rules regulated in our business, and then we would map it out and go, okay, living within inside these guidelines, how do we solve this problem? Like, how do
Hmm.
we do what we need to do and what we, and serve our customer the way they need to be served? living inside of what all this said,
Yeah.
right?
That's really cool to
And
do it, to visualize it.
right, and the only thing I didn't have was the floor of the ceiling, so it wasn't 360, right? It was
Wow.
but yeah, all the walls and the doors even, are all whiteboard material, so you could just like go crazy in that room and draw all over it. So my
That's
office was that way too. So my office was just like I'm a very visual person,
yeah.
but
Your
so
kids must have had a field day at your office.
oh, they loved it, right? I had there was a learning curve that not all walls are writing material walls,
No.
at the house. Like, quit drawing on the walls. Like, you let me do that in the
Yeah.
office, right?
Well, it's the same thing. If you know the rules, it's the same exact idea. If you know the rules, you know your bounds, then you
Yeah,
can do anything you want here,
yeah, yeah,
Go here, do go wild, and then you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
yeah. Like, this is not, if it's not white and shiny, you can't write on it.
Yeah.
So it was all whiteboard
But if
material.
it is white and shiny, you can write, just kind of changing your
Yeah,
mindset around it. If it's white and shiny, do whatever you want.
yeah. And please don't use the other one was they would grab because we had big giant rolls of paper and we had crayons and Sharpies, right? For the ground,
Oh, you don't want the
please
Sharpies on
don't put the
there. Yeah.
crayons or the Sharpies on the wall. Like, use the
Yeah.
white,
The
right?
white marker.
But you put a group of incredibly intelligent people in the same room and said, here's we had a big boardroom table, cover that with paper, give them crayons, markers, pens, and then the whiteboards or the walls, and you give them a problem to solve and a way to actually visually think. You'd be
Mm,
surprised on how fast they can solve some really complex things.
that's
So
awesome.
we called it our little think tank. Our
Mm,
entrepreneur center had one too. So we had a real estate entrepreneur center where we created a think tank inside of it, and people would come over and use it occasionally just to solve problems. They'd bring their team over. We
mm.
roll out the paper all over. We'd cover the desk with these big rolls of paper. Gave them bags, giant, 1 pound bags of crayons and Sharpies and just random stuff all over the table, like kind of scattered throughout the middle, and then
That's really cool because I think that if you were doing things the way everybody else did, you would just have a pen and paper or a PowerPoint presentation. But
yeah,
instead, you're like, "Here's the way we're gonna do this,"
yeah,
and you're gonna get a way better outcome
yeah,
because you gave you and your team that flexibility.
yeah,
And it's not like anyone looked down, or you're not above using a whiteboard or crayons even,
yeah,
or colors.
yeah.
So I think that's a really good representation of doing things differently.
And they would bring in notepads, and they could do whatever they wanted, but the
Yeah,
whole like, we'd
don't
set
hold
a
your hands
po
out to that.
we did
Yeah,
the Pomodoro technique, which is that little food timer,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So I'd write a problem up on the board and kinda give maybe 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, here's what we're trying to solve. I put it on
Hmm.
one board, maybe a problem statement, 4 or 5 bullet, like, here's 4 facts you need to know about the problem.
Right.
And then I set a timer for 15 minutes, and everybody would, like, they almost looked like they were prison, eating prison meals. They had their arms out where nobody could see their stuff, and they would, like, solve their problem. It was funny
Mhm.
because they'd everybody get a little protective because, you know,
Right.
people get stumped and they start trying to look over it, and it was fun, right?
Yeah.
Everybody would solve the, like, right. I was like, now write out, just don't think yes or no. Don't validate your own thoughts.
Mhm.
Just start writing thoughts down and what,
Brain
that
dump.
and, brain dump everything down, and then we'll validate in the second round. And then, so we do like 15 minutes of that, and then we did like a 5 minute thing where, okay, now validate. Spend
Mm.
5 minutes and really figure out which ones are your top. And then
Yeah.
the next thing is, okay, you got 3 minutes to present. So we go around
Mm.
the room, everybody get 3 minutes to present the top ones they have. And then we didn't make any decisions till we heard everybody's out. So
Mm.
that was a way to solve some of the really more complex things. So,
Sounds
but
fun.
yeah, you talk. I just brought it. I've never even brought that up on the show before, but that
Mhm.
was done because, like, yeah, I really brought it up because that was an artistic way that we did things that were probably different than
Yeah.
anybody else.
Yeah.
And
That sounds cool.
it's funny is
I like
a couple of those people who left and went to work and did something because they were interns or whatever. They would bring their boss in their new company. Hey, can we borrow your office for a while? Will you orchestrate the first time for us? I show them how it's done, and they would come over and I'd set up the room and we would do one for them. For like get them started.
Mhm.
And it's just a different way. I'm positive I didn't come up with it. I read so many books and watch so many training
Yeah.
things. I probably butchered together 2 or 3 other people's ideas, but it worked. It worked for us.
Yeah. That sounds
So
really
let's go back to your law firm and what you do there. Do you when you're looking at these people and they have partnerships and stuff, do you recommend things like key man policies, buyout agreements, and that type
yeah.
of stuff in the corporate structure? 'Cause I'm a big fan of if I've got a partner, what happens when I want to document it. What happens when things aren't working? What happens if
Yeah.
something happens to you? Right?
So there's like, yeah, you wanna like, so one of the questions we ask is, what happens if someone wants to be bought out, or if they wanna exit, or what happens if someone dies, or even if
Mhm.
they get divorced. In some states, you can include provisions around that.
Or
And
married,
also,
that's much worse. Well,
yeah, married. Yeah, make sure.
I've had more business partners where I've had to go, I'm not in business with your wife, man. You just got married. I don't even know this lady yet."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
"My
like
wife
you
thinks we should
require
be."
them to get a prenup of some sort and make sure they can't have
Or
access
they
to
just
the
come in the office,
business.
"My wife thinks we should be doing X, Y, and Z." It's like, "I'm not in
Yeah,
business with your wife, man. Why don't you bring her
yeah,
in here and introduce me?"
exactly.
Does she know more about business than me and you? Because 'Cause I'd love to meet her, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then I tell my clients, like uh, part of the of part of me helping them assemble their team is make sure they have an insurance broker. So for those key men policies, make
Yeah.
sure that they have something in place for that. So absolutely, just to make sure, again, like I mean, the whole goal ultimately what is to just is so that the business owner can focus on making their dreams come true. And if you're ever in survival mode, it's hard to be creative. And one way to be in survival mode is to end up in court, and you're not really thinking about growth and creativity. You're thinking about, oh my god, attorney's fees, and will my business survive, and how am I going to get food on the table? You don't want to be there, so preempt that.
I've been there before. Yeah, not fun. Only once or twice. I've been in, but and it never made it to court. We settled it out beforehand.
Yeah,
I went out and basically hired attorneys I could barely afford that were better than theirs, and hired forensic CPA firms to, like, go through
yeah.
their books and all that, and they begged for mutual dismissal after they see what I had lined up,
Yeah,
right? Like, we don't really like, they were suing us, like, "We really don't wanna do this now." Like, "Okay,
right.
well, we can stop if you want."
Call their
Um,
bluff.
I was like, "Alright," but they owed us a lot of the person that sued us owed us a lot of money. We left
Mm,
and created a competing business because of it, and, he tried to sue us for all kinds of weird stuff, I forgot what,
mm,
and we're like, "Alright, let's do this," right? You hadn't he owed me 62K, he owed the other guy in my company about 70 something. Like, "We're going
wow.
after our money we're owed, and we're gonna audit all your books because you're not only did you not pay us, you're not paying any of your investors, so we're gonna make that public." The
Mm,
investors that were getting equity also weren't
right.
getting they were misstating their books to them, and we knew it. It's like,
Yikes.
so I was like,
Yeah.
I hired a forensic CPA firm.
Yeah.
And and when what is it called when the two attorneys meet and they, like, disclose the plan, like, this is how we're gonna do it. There's that
Yeah,
discovery
there's
or
like a
whatever.
discovery meeting, yeah.
Yeah. Within an hour of the discovery meeting, their attorney called back and goes, "My client wants to, really encourage me just do a mutual dismissal. He doesn't wanna go any
Mm,
further with this."
that's
So,
good, yeah, and it probably helps too if you had I'm assuming that you, or it sounds like you did have partnership agreements and operating, so that's a lot easier to
mhm,
get your clients', cases dismissed, or to have a better outcome because you have those files and you're not, like, relying
yeah,
on the state laws, because
yeah,
sometimes those are vague, or they don't, like, there's just a lot of gaps.
yeah.
So you kinda like, you had a clear strategy to do what you need to do because you know what the rules are because you wrote them.
Oh, this guy was dirty too, yeah. He'd been sued once before, and I'll tell you how dirty he was. He had the attorney that was suing him called me because he's seen my case, and I won't say his name on the air, but he said, "How
Mm,
dangerous is this guy?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, yeah, he's acting like he's connected, and he's acting like he's asking me, how my kids are and stuff like that. He's asking this attorney. He did the same to the attorney went to the judge and complained, and the judge was like, "Yeah, he did that to me too." So they wanted to know because how connect is this guy really like
something, yeah.
connected, or is this guy really dangerous? Like, nah, I don't think so, right? But the guy was just dirty, and I won't say his name on here just because I don't want to
Yeah,
get into defamation. We don't throw shade at anybody here.
yeah,
But, just understand, like anybody in business, if you're in business long enough, or if especially in certain business like real estate, if you're in real estate long enough, you're eventually gonna need an attorney.
yeah,
So better have one to set it all up right, get it done right.
exactly.
It's part of the game. Like, the game of business is you need attorneys to set your stuff up, do it right, and you need them to protect what they did when it comes time that some so, yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of people try to do this on their own. Like, I'm kinda guilty of I'll set up my own LLC real quick. I've got so many operating agreements, I can put one together, but I still my attorney gets mad because I was like, "I just need you to review this." Right?
yeah,
"What did you do?" And I was like, "I set it all up. It took me 2 hours. I've got everything going. I don't wanna wait 2 weeks for you to do it, and, like, so here's everything. Tell me do you need to make any changes?" He's like, "Well, it looks exactly like the one I wrote." Like, yeah, I copied the one you wrote, changed the names on it, wrote, and I just give them a list. Like, here's the sections I wrote, like, section 1,
Mhm.
2, and 5, 1.5, 1.8, or just give them all the list. And it's
Yeah.
usually things that the business partner and I agreed upon or something weird,
Mm.
right?
That's good to have, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, having those I mean, because you seem sophisticated enough where you kind of know what's important to talk about. A lot of people they don't,
Yeah.
and they try to do it on their own, and they don't even think about asking what happens if someone were to die, or if there's an estate plan, should that be taken into account?
Yeah.
Or what happens if someone wants to leave, or if there's a minority member, do they have rights? All of that they don't even think about, and then until they need to. It's kind of like anyone who's ever been through a divorce, which sounds like you have. Kind of wish you had a prenup and you would have spent any amount of money to have that prenup instead of being in court longer than you have to, arguing over assets and custody.
That last one you said there, if you're a minority member, do you have rights? That depends on state by state too, doesn't it?
Well, you can also put something in the operating agreement too,
As I
especially
say,
like, yeah, like tag along rights and
yeah.
drag along rights. Yeah,
Yeah,
stuff
so,
like that.
that's one of the things that got him is he didn't say that we didn't have full rights, right? Inside of the
Mm,
operating agreement or everything, basically, I was a 12.5% owner, the other guy was a 18% owner, and, but because they didn't define everything, we had all the rights to see all the books. We had all the rights to
mm,
like to do that CPA audit and everything, because we were full acting members under state
mm,
Oklahoma anyway. So our attorney like, "Oh, you have the rights to see all that stuff." Like he
mm,
didn't, he didn't state in there because you're a minority thing you couldn't do certain things, and you never
right.
agreed to be limited. So let's do it.
Mm,
So
yeah. It's good to
um,
have, good to know. Have a
yeah. So it's important if you're out there creating the stuff to have an attorney go, hey,
yeah,
how many people are going to work with this are going to eventually give other people equity?
yeah,
What do you want their capabilities to be if you give them equity? That type of
yeah,
questions, right?
yeah. Those are questions that we ask, yeah.
Have you ever seen the book by Mike Moyer called Slicing Pie?
I don't think I have, no.
Check that out sometimes. You were talking
Slicing
about
pie.
equity and how it's split and whether money's a
Mm,
loan or not a loan. Um, Mike Moyer, I think is his name, Moyer. He created a system for that. Mostly, it came out of the tech
I've
space.
heard of, okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and basically, it has a mechanism in it to determine equity ownership based on the hours you put in, the value of your
Mm,
hours, and then equity ownership based on the dollars you put in. And it's a standardized process. It even has a little software tool and stuff you can actually track it.
mm,
And it's way more equitable in my eyes than going, we're creating this business together, me and you, Danya, and we're going to do this, and you get 50%, I get 50%.
yeah, yeah,
You're busy and I'm busy, right?
yeah,
I own multiple businesses. I've got things going on. How many hours am I going to give you and how many hours you're going to put in? Who's more
yeah,
passionate in this is going to drop some of the other stuff to get it done, right?
yeah,
It's never going to be fair. It's
yeah,
never going to be fair. And if you either have to acknowledge that and like, okay, I'm going to be getting most of this stuff done and only own 50%, or find a system out there that rewards you for the hours you put in and the money you put in.
yeah,
So
yeah, and I think another way too is to give the person who's working more a salary, if an accountant agrees. I would say consult your accountant on that too,
yeah.
but that's one way I do it too. So, but that's, yeah, I'll definitely check that out. That sounds
Check it out. It's
cool.
a real simple small book, but it's the
Mm,
premise is really cool, and they have some software and tools. I recommend it all the time. So there's 2 books I recommend all the time. The other one is the, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, and basically
mm.
it's about anytime you procrastinate doing anything, you probably should have somebody else do it for you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
instead
like
of anytime you're asking,
writing
"How
your
do I
operating agreement.
yeah. Or it's like, yeah, or how do I do this? If you gotta figure out how, you're probably not the right person, right?
Yeah,
How do
yeah,
I write an operating agreement?
yeah,
Yeah, you're probably not the right person for that. Probably have an attorney do it for
exactly.
you, unless you've seen 100. Like, I'm 51. I've seen so many of them. I can get the premise of it down. I've got so many samples from everything. I can get
Yeah,
the premise of it down and hand it to somebody and go, how much trouble am I going to get into by running it this way, right? And they
yeah,
can read through it. Now, if I switched attorney, I guarantee every attorney operating agreements are kind of like trusts.
mhm,
Every attorney that sees it a trust, and I use a lot of trust for different things. Everyone that ever sees one that it's new to them thinks it's wrong and they want to do it their way. Operating
mhm.
agreements are the same thing. If you give them your operating agreement to any attorney on the planet, I swear they're going to make a dozen changes to it. And then you take it and he thinks it's perfect. You hand it to the next attorney and they're going to make a dozen changes to it.
Yeah, Yeah, I think because part of it is liability, honestly, too. Like, I don't usually review my own clients' work
Yeah.
because I'm like, well, it's really the amount of work to review it is almost the same as just
Well,
writing it
I
from
don't get
scratch.
much of a discount.
Yeah, so yeah, so I'm just like, it's the same because
Uh,
it's for me, it's the same liability. I still have to make sure still have to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. Otherwise, if there was something wrong, it's going to come back on me. So it's not really less work.
I made this
It's
story
really
too simple. It's a
yeah.
format that he's done over and
Mm,
over, like, you know, it's like the 3rd time I've used it, and he created the first one. So once he
mm.
sees, he's like, "Yeah, this is the one I wrote." Like, "Yeah, now will you give me that daggum discount?" He
Yeah,
goes, "Well,
yeah,
I
maybe
still
if I
have."
knew the client well enough and I gave enough disclaimers, but yeah, I could see maybe how that would work in someone in like your situation, but generally it's a liability issue too.
It is
So
definitely, I get
yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
Because you gotta defend that, like, the other thing is, I don't typically go to attorneys. I ask them, it's like, how do you like doing litigations and stuff? And my business attorney says, "Oh, I don't ever go to court."
Yeah. Same.
Like, if they say I'm good at it, I'll do it if I want to, but it's not what I wanna do. That's my attorney for me because anybody that writes a document for me, I want them to be the person either at least have somebody on their team that loves doing it to defend the
Mhm.
daggum thing,
Mm.
right? So if we end up in litigation because of that contract, are you gonna be able to argue your work in
Yeah.
court? So,
Yeah. Although some might see it as a conflict of interest too. I don't know. So, I don't
yeah,
know,
might be
unless
a
they
very
have like a
personal
larger
preference of
firm.
mine.
Yeah. No, I mean, the lawyer might see it as a
Oh,
conflict of interest because they need to represent their client, but they're also kind of defending themselves.
mhm,
So I think that might be one reason why attorneys might not want to do that.
mhm.
Just it's really in the best interest of the client. But I don't litigate. So maybe
I get that, I get that.
focus. Yeah.
So, how do people find you? What's the way you want people to reach out to you if they have questions for you? You and I met on LinkedIn, I know you're active there.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought you put enough video out there, I thought you had your own little podcast and stuff because 'cause I've seen your little video clips and
People do
stuff.
think that. They keep asking to join my pod. I'm like, "No, I've just been on enough other people's podcasts."
Yeah,
They can email so they can email me directly at, Danya at motivalaw.com, so DANYA at motivalaw.com, or call our office at 630-517-5529. They can also, if you just Google the name of my firm, you'll also get our YouTube and Instagram. It's a great way to get to know me as well by just seeing my videos. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. And our
cool.
website, of course, motivalaw.com.
Yeah, well, I think we're almost out of time, so we'll call that a show, but thank you for being here today, it was fun. One last thing, we always do this, one
Mhm.
big takeaway, if somebody could remember only one thing from our show today, what would you want them to walk away with?
A cheap tool is an expensive tool. If you try to do something cheap, you're going to pay for it later somehow, in some other way. So I would say that.
Awesome. So, and I get that, I've done that before, like, I'm gonna save money, I'm gonna do this myself, and then
Yes,
later on, it's like, "Ah, I wish I had
pay
paid
double.
somebody else." Yeah.
And you end up
They
paying double to
sometimes
fix
you
it
pay
and
it
do it
8
right.
and
Yeah.
10x, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure.
so, you know, it's cheaper, much cheaper to pay attorney to set something up for you than it is to pay attorney to defend you in
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Something that a layperson wrote. Yeah.
Exactly. Alright, I appreciate you, you have a great day, and we'll call that a show.
Thank you.